My name is Marian Overhold. I'm the Executive Director of Legal Assistance of Windsor and Community Legal Aid. This event tonight is very much a collaborative effort. We had an organizing committee come together made up of the Unemployed Help Center, the Workers Education Center, the Downtown Community Collaborative, the Bilingual Clinic, W5, Mental Health Connections, Labor Council, Local 543, and our two offices at Legal Assistance of Windsor and Community Legal Aid. So we just said, okay, these are important issues that have been announced in this provincial budget, and we want to address those. So we're just delighted that you all came out. I especially want to acknowledge the presence of Lisa Gretzky and Percy Hatfield, our two local MPPs. So tonight, what we're doing, we're really giving you an opportunity to respond to the budget. It's been challenging because we've heard a steady stream of announcements, and it's really, I know I've been feeling overwhelmed just about trying to keep track about all the changes, and I know the people that we work with in the low-income community of Windsor and Essex County are very concerned about what the impacts of these cuts are going to be. So we thought tonight, by bringing people together, we were creating a forum to be able to listen to each other and understand what's happening, and looking at how we can go forward together, and whether that means building a coalition, arranging for more meetings, taking some joint action. I think it's really important for the community to stay united. So off to my left, we have a very distinguished panel of three very honored community leaders. We were very lucky to obtain their support tonight. So we have at the far left is Marina Clemens, a well-known community leader from Drouillard and Drouillard Place. We have Dave Croswell, who is a former executive of Local 200 with Unifor, and Hugo Vega, who is with the YMCA and is the chair of LAW's board. So their purpose tonight is to listen to the presentation by people, what you have to say, what your concerns are. They're going to be taking some notes. At about 8:15, they're going to run away, look at what they have in their notes, and come back and make some recommendations to us about how we go forward. So we're really grateful for them to come out tonight and play this role. So thank you so much, honored panel. Yay. This event is also being recorded, so we have all possible social media happening here. So if you don't want to be recorded, just see this lovely lady in blue, just let her know. This is Laura Pratt, so anything that LAW does that looks amazing, it's Laura Pratt's at the bottom of it, okay? So we're very grateful for all Laura's done tonight in terms of organizing this event, and on all these little details, she's the queen of details. So you don't want your picture taken, you just let Laura know, and that'll be fine. So because we have live broadcasting happening, I'm going to ask you just to exercise just a little bit of restraint, and so please don't say the F word. Okay, I know you're really frustrated, I know you're really angry, and I know it's just really hard, but if we could not do that, I would so appreciate it. We're going to let people talk for, 5 minutes each. I'm moderating, and so, I'm wicked with the mic, and so if I'm cutting you off, you're going to be cut off. Just so you know, I just don't have any, oh yeah, that'll be okay. No, I'm going to cut you off, okay? Because we really want to give everybody a chance to be heard tonight and, raise the issues. Within our sector, within the legal clinic world, we're very concerned about the 30% cut to our funder, Legal Aid. We know it's going to directly affect client services. And, at a time when the government is making so many changes in the legislation we deal with, we need to be in a situation where we are able to respond and help the government understand what they're doing. And so we're really concerned that these cuts are really going to impact on our services. We're especially concerned about what's happening with the legal aid, provision of legal aid for refugees. And as you may have seen in the paper, that service has been cut back on the certificate side to preparing only the basis of claim documents, which is the very first document that a refugee would file. And you know, the expectation that they will somehow be able to manage appeal work is just not realistic, and we're very concerned about what's going to happen. We know that there are a series of changes coming. We've been talking about the change to the definition of disability for the Ontario Disability Support Program. So if anybody you know right now is thinking about applying for a disability pension, they should do so right now, because that definition is going to be changed, and they're adopting a much more strict definition. It's what they're looking at is a standard of severe and prolonged, which is what Canada Pension disability requirements are. And we know as a result there'll be a number of people who will no longer qualify because they won't meet that test. And people who are going to be particularly vulnerable are people with episodic mental health conditions. So if you know people who you think should be on a disability pension, they should apply now under the old definition. We're starting a campaign over the changes that the government is contemplating in November to temporary care benefits and the transitional child benefits, because eliminating those benefits will mean that caregivers and parents won't be able to feed their children. It's that basic. So I know when you came in, we gave you a whole pile of information, and there's a couple information sheets on both of those issues, so please read those and share those. We also have petitions at the back, so please sign the petitions. There is a website that you can go to for the legal aid to stop the legal aid cuts, and it's so simple. You just go on, you put in your name and address, you hit send, and you have just told the Premier of Ontario and the Attorney General what your concerns are. So we've tried to make it easy and straightforward as possible. So what I'm going to do now, I think Laura has the sheet, and okay. So we got one sheet now that we're working with, and then, you know, feel free to, you know, if you want to say something, sign the second sheet at the back. And what's going to happen is when I call out your name, and if I destroy it or I can't read it, I apologize for that. The world knows I'm really bad with names, but I'm going to call out your name, and then Laura's going to, if you just raise your hand, Laura will bring the mic to you. Okay? So first person up is Tanner from Legal Assistance Windsor. And he's at the very, very back.
Hi everyone. So my name is Tanner Blom, and I'm a law student at Legal Assistance Windsor. I completed an academic placement program with them for my second year of law school. I'm now going back with them for the summer to be on the I Decide project with my staff lawyer Stephanie Dixon over there, who is leading a steering committee for I Decide and focusing on giving people back their decision-making rights around things like personal care and property management and that sort of thing. So what I wanted to talk about was how these budget cuts are impacting the students from our perspective. So what law students are required to do in order to complete their, get their degree, is to undergo an articling process where you have to do 10 months of work directly under a lawyer, and that's one of the requirements that you need in order to do this. So because of the budget cuts, Legal Aid and Legal Assistance of Windsor Community Legal Aid were not able to offer articling positions this year. And there is an articling crisis that's going on. There's not really a lot of articling positions that are available. So the ones that do get posted are very important to us because we need this in order to get our degrees, and we've invested a lot of time, money, and effort into getting our degrees. And so if we can't article, it's kind of sucks for us. So what these positions mean for us and the community is, one, it's an opportunity for us to complete our articling degrees and get our JD requirements, and also we provide a valuable service to the community. So I think, you know, by not funding legal aid, you're not getting the benefit of both of those things. You're not giving law students the chance to get their articling degrees, or get their articling requirements, and there is a dire need that's going underserved in our community. There are people here that need access to education, that need access to things like basic money to support their family, their friends, and themselves. And what we can do as ArtLink students is to connect people with those services. But if we're defunded, we don't get the benefit of those positions, and the people that we serve are going not represented. So it's, you know, it's a good thing in order to fund us because it gives law students a chance to practice, and it's serving a need that our community desperately needs. So that's the student perspective on these budget cuts and how they're affecting us personally. I was planning on applying for legal assistance articling position, CLA articling position, but unfortunately, after these budget cuts have come through, I had to pull those positions and I've had to apply elsewhere. So that is the sad reality of how these budget cuts are impacting students on the ground. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thanks so much, Tanner. Second person is going to be so Anne Beer, who's with the Council of Canadians. She's here in green, and she's with Windsor on Watch. Nice to see you, Anne.
I would like to, on Council of Canadians, close to your mouth. Windsor on Watch. We would like to organize a new group, a new Green Deal in Canada, and which means there are already hundreds of cities who are organizing to get social, economic justice in Canada, not only locally, but don't forget we're getting election pretty soon as well. We're just getting going, so you will get a request to tell you or your group exactly what you are interested in to represent Windsor. For example, it's transportation, could be farming, it could be housing even, but so we can get together and organize a group maybe early in the fall or late summer to get together and make a statement and start fighting for our rights.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks very much. The next person is Liz Guerin with the Windsor Injured Workers.
I've been a forklift driver for 11 years, so just mind me. Okay, I'm part of the ONUWIG, which is Ontario Network of Injured Workers, and we're province-wide. These legal aid cuts are really going to hit the injured workers. Like she said, the ODSP and the CPP cuts. Legal clinics is one key service that receives the funding from Legal Aid Ontario under the serious threats from the cuts. The clinics not only provide legal services to ONUWIG as an organization, they also provide representation to individual injured workers across the province in the appeals for workplace safety, insurance boards, and tribunals. Increasing the clinics also represent injured workers before the social benefit tribunals, as many are forced to apply for Ontario Works, Ontario Disability, after the WSA claim is denied of their benefits cuts. A 30% cut to legal aid budget will ultimately affect the ability for clinics to deliver their services. Legal aid is also funds services related to immigration and refugee law, housing and evictions. In many cultural and caustic communities, they are disproportionately affected by work injury. Many legal clinics are already operating on bare bones to begin with. If these cuts come in, injured workers will not be able to get funding from legal aid at all, and they're forced onto ODSP. There's already a waiting list at Worker advisories for people to go on it, and they'll have nowhere to go. We have a bunch of help in Toronto, that all the legal aids will be cut down up there. We have speaker school for injured workers, those will be shut down from legal aid, there'll be no funding. We really, really depend on legal aid. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Melissa. And then we have Noah Gaston from Students Say No. Here's Noah.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Noah Gaston, and I'm the provincial co-director of the Students Say No movement. So just to give you guys some background information, if you're unfamiliar with this, we're the group that led the largest student-led walkout in Canadian history on April 5th, protesting the Ford government's cuts and changes to our education system. So I just want to go over a few of the main points that are very detrimental to our education system, and some of these changes that have a very lasting impact if they're enforced. So first of all, I think one of the main issues for both staff and students across all of our schools is the change in class sizes. Now, the class size average will change from 22 to 28 students, and some people might think that 28 isn't that bad, but you have to look at it this way. There's going to be so many courses, and there's going to be so many teachers that are laid off, so many courses that are canceled, that students are going to have less options, and students are going to be shoved into classrooms with possibly over 40 people. And I'm not sure if it's just me, but being in a class of over 40 people doesn't increase my resiliency skills, as the minister stated. Now, one of the main things too is that when I was at my school, I was called down to the guidance office for an appointment, and they told me that they canceled American history for grade 11. And she told me that was the first time in 20 years that they canceled the course. And as we all know, those who don't learn history are bound to repeat it. And I
teach Americans American
that
history.
We need to have history courses and other social science courses in place, as well as our technology departments and our ed departments, because that's what really stimulates Ontario. Next, one of the other things is e-learning. Students across Ontario will be required to take 4 mandatory e-learning courses throughout the course of their high school career. Now, there are many students across Ontario who are in remote, rural areas who can't necessarily have a great internet access, and they can't hand in assignment in on time. As well, you have low-income families who can't necessarily afford to buy a computer or an electronic device to do the work on. So requiring this will only hurt rural students and students who are of low income. Next thing as well is there's a department called Student Success that is implemented in many of the schools across Ontario. Now, this program helps students with mental health issues get their high school diploma and proceed into the workforce. And there are many students at my school who are on this program, and there are many students across Windsor Essex who are on this program. And the Ford government is considering eliminating this. And when he was asked by a reporter the question, will you be eliminating all student success teachers and departments in the province, he failed to answer the question. And if this department is eliminated, you can see graduation rates drop across the province, possibly. The next thing too is teacher layoffs. Teachers are some of the people who inspired me, inspired so many others to be standing against these cuts. And it would be a shame to see so many of them laid off. The Premier claimed during the election campaign that not one teacher in the province will be laid off. Right now, over 2,000 teachers have been handed either layoff notices or redundancy notices. No, I'm not sure if it's just me, but I don't think the promises were kept there. Now, the other thing too is myself, I'm in high school, so I don't necessarily have to worry about this right now, but in the future is, I'm sure many university students have to worry about this, is OSAP. Now, OSAP has helped so many students get through university and provide that extra push so they can afford it. Now, he's cut quite a significant amount from OSAP, and instead of having more grants to provide students with a more solid path to education, not necessarily be stuck with mounds of student debt, they're going to be making more of a loans-based system, which is just going to be detrimental. And especially when you look at the fact that the Premier wants Ontario to be an economically beneficial place and open for business, when you are cutting money from education, you're indirectly taking away funding from the economy. And when you take away funding from the economy, well, we all know where that goes. And finally, one thing I just want to advertise to everyone is that this Saturday we're going to be having a rally for education in downtown Windsor. For those of you who want to protest and stand against this, we'd be happy to have you. It's going to be in Charles Clark Square, and it's going to be from 12 to 1:30, and we hope to see you there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Noah. Was that on Saturday?
This Saturday.
Saturday? Okay. Yeah. If panelists have any questions anytime, you just belt it out, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Next I have Paul Chislett from the Windsor Workers Education Office.
Tripping my own cord. Thanks very much. Thanks for organizing this too, and for having the panel together. So the Worker Center has been front and center. It's only a few years ago that we were part of a province-wide effort to get the Employment Standards Act, which is the minimums for non-union workers in Ontario. You know, better minimum wage, some sick days off, and that sort of thing. So that took years to do under the Liberal government, only to be completely undone by the Ford regime. I refuse to call it a government. So just briefly, that's huge from a specific point of view of the Worker Center, but also more broadly, you know, this is a political problem. And we're going to hear from all kinds of sectors, and this is important. It's coalition building, which is important. But I'm really convinced. I mean, I remember the Harris years, many of us in here do, but this is worse because there's a global rise of authoritarianism around the world, and Doug Ford's just one cog in that wheel. I think you could even argue that his is an illegitimate government. Even there was a bit of a coup within the Conservative Party that he was able to kind of sneak in the chaos to become leader of the party, and then there was already mood in the province that there needed to be change, and the NDP put up a heroic effort, but you know, was at least in official opposition. So I don't want to go on too long, but this is a political problem, and I know it's distasteful to think of people in the streets. I mean, I've done it, many of us in here have done it, but really we're faced with making the province of Ontario ungovernable. We have to show Bay Street that it won't be business as usual, so they can scream to their buddy Ford in office that you've got to do something, you've got to pull back, and they'll, you know, they'll try to just pull back a little bit, and then we'll get complacent thinking we're winning, and so on and so forth. So there'll be this seesaw battle until we get to the next election, but we can't wait till the next election. The students are leading the way when it comes to climate change and the political crises that we're in around the world. It's a crisis of vision. You know, the left has tried a strategy over the last 20 years of centralism, you know, centrism in politics, but I think there needs to be a resurgence of true left thinking. And when I say that, I simply mean putting the economy and the globe, the environment, and people first. We make the economy and politics work for people, not the other way around. So that's the long-range thing, but right now we're faced with a regime like the Ford one, the Fordites. These are people that will stop at nothing because they're emboldened by the global trend, right? So I'm sure out of this coalition building we'll continue to figure out how exactly we do that. But I think what we're calling radical action is needed, but what's radical about people having a decent living, being able to afford an apartment, being able to afford food, being able to put a little bit of extra money aside for trips and so on and so forth. There's nothing radical about that, and that's what we're talking about being for people to be able to do. And this government's in the way of that, and we have to do something about it. So I hope that this coalition, what we're starting tonight, will, you know, take off. Thank you.
QP Frontline Worker is next.
Hi everyone, my name is Jesse Simonetti. I'm a frontline worker who works in the Ontario Works office. I'm also a representative as far as social service workers across Ontario. I'm with QP Local 543, and I'm the QP Council President. And I wanted to speak on a couple of different things. So from a perspective of where I work, in terms of with social services, in terms of one of the things that the Ford government is doing is they're opening up Employment Ontario to competitive bidding, right? And that could be opened up to for-profit companies. And what that's going to do is it's going to take money out of the system that's designed to assist people to move along the continuum to get work or training. So that's a bit of a problem. Along that lines, one of the things that they're going to do with changes to Ontario Works is they're going to make some changes to the earnings exemption. So they're kind of tweaking that a little bit, but the way that they're tweaking that, basically what's going to happen is that people are going to be pushed off the system that much quicker. So currently right now, someone who's on Ontario Works, if you find work, part-time work or whatever, the first $200 that you make is revenue exempt, and then you're allowed to keep 50 cents on the dollar, and social services will deduct 50 cents on the dollar. Come October, that funding formula will change, so a person will be able to keep $300, but after that, the social services will deduct 75 cents on each dollar earned. So basically what will happen is that they'll get to keep that extra 100, but they'll be pushed off the system that much quicker. So I wanted to talk about that. Then I wanted to talk about the fact that because I'm on the social service committee provincially, there's cuts that are going to be being made to children's aid societies. In essence, the funding that is going to be provided to children's services is not going to keep up with inflation, and in fact, it's not creating any new daycare spaces, right? So that's a problem. So I also wanted to talk about the fact that on a personal level, I've got two aged parents. So my dad is 97, my mom is 87, they both have health issues. We're trying to navigate through the CCAC system. We're still trying to figure that out. And now we're going to have to deal with a new super health system, and what that's going to entail, Lord knows, right? And all along, what the Ford regime talked about is basically efficiencies. But let's call a spade a spade. What they're doing is they're making cuts to everything. And I don't think there's a person here who's not going to be affected by any of these cuts. The last thing I was going to say is we've had some issues here with flooding, and guess what? There's going to be some cuts to IRCA for flood protection, right? Like, does that make sense at all? Anyway, that's just a couple of thoughts.
Thanks so much, Jesse. Okay. And now I have Barb Dieter from Ontario Nurses Association, the Windsor-Essex Health Unit.
Hi, good evening, everybody. So I'm with Windsor-Essex Health Unit. As we all are very concerned about the cuts that are happening. We know it, like as nurses, that the value of a well-staffed, well-resourced healthcare system in the province is what we need. We actually haven't had that for probably over 10 years. I know with the Harris PC government, there were 10,000 registered nurses positions that were cut. The funding that's being given has been less than inflation rate, and so we're already in a bad state as it is. Now there are more cuts coming. The aging population, the growing population is something that has to be considered, which I don't think it has been. And now the Ford government is talking, or not talking, they are slashing our funding to public health units. and they're cutting down the number. We have 35 health units in Ontario, and they're going to be cut down to 10. So many people don't know what we do in the community. I think a lot of people found out we just finished a 9.5-week strike, so people did get informed of many of the services that we provide. But one of our big jobs, we protect all of you against, we do vaccinations, to prevent all the outbreaks, and we treat, TB and sexually transmitted diseases, which is very high in our area. With the new layout that they've given, our health unit is going to be amalgamated with 4 others. It's a huge area, but most public health units are very specific to their communities. We do assessments, we know what's going on here, and that's what we deal with. So the concern is, if we have this big area now to cover, is anybody going to care what's happening to us down here in Windsor? And that is a big concern. So, what else can I tell you about us? There are a lot of outbreaks that happen here. I guess the big thing why people don't know, because we're the behind the scenes people that stop those outbreaks from happening before, we have huge measles outbreaks. We get those vaccinations done and take care of that. Let's see. So our public health system is, we respond very quickly to the local issues, the local outbreaks, and the specific needs, as I said. And this public health decrease in funding it's basically a disaster waiting to happen. Years ago, a few years back, when there were funding cuts to public health, that's when the big SARS outbreak and the Walkerton tainted water scandal happened. So those are issues that we take care of. But if our funding's gone, there won't be anybody there to do that. So I guess we all have to just speak to people in power, MPPs, write letters, and see if we can keep our funding. Don't let them change the system or make it better.
Okay, and then our next speaker is Ahmed Abdallah from the University of Windsor Student Alliance.
Hey folks, like she said, my name is Ahmed. I am the Vice President of Student Services at the University of Windsor Students Alliance. My mandate is pretty much dealing with all our student service centers, like our Campus Pride and our Peer Support Center, and I also do all the parties as well, so there's a lot we do. In January, we had a big attack, and a lot of our education type funding was cut. To specify some things, domestic students had a 10% cut on tuition, but it only affected domestic students, and international students already pay double or triple of what domestic students pay. And on top of that, that 10% used to go to our institution at the University of Windsor, and now the University of Windsor has to make up that 10% loss. And the way they made up the 10% loss was attach an increase in graduate study of engineering, which is majority, almost all of it, is international students. So it's a 9% increase. So we're basically adding a 9% increase on top of a 10% decrease they didn't get. So that's kind of already something we're trying to deal with. So the Liberal government also attached a 6-month grace period after the OSAP. After you're graduated, you have 6 months to find a job, get money. That's also slashed. So now there's no more 6-month grace period on interest, and you have to start paying your OSAP right away, or you get interest accumulated on the spot. Some OSAP facts were stated earlier. So we will not have as many grants. We'll be having more loans like it was previous to the 2016 switch after the Liberal government came in and was like, okay, we'll give you more grants, we'll decrease the loans. That really helped out for me personally. I saw a complete decrease in the amount of loans I was taking, and it was a lot of grants, so they're non-repayable, so that really helped me out. A lot of students do rely on the on the OSAP, and this is just going to increase student debt, which is already high. And I don't want to talk for so long because there's a lot to discuss. But finally, the biggest thing that I think us at the Student Union are dealing with is the Student Choice Initiative. So a part of that is basically students get to opt out of the fee that is charged to them for organizing and being able to function as a student union. So we charge students $60, and in that $60 breakdown, it's just a bunch of different services that we provide. Some of those services, like I said earlier, Campus Pride Center, our Women's Center, our Peer Support Center. We also facilitate funding to community legal aid. That's also going to be affected. Basically what the Student Choice Initiative is, it gives student choice to opt out of all of these fees, even though they are democratically chosen referendum fees that have been from years and years and years ago. It's all kind of laid out on the table, and basically it's like students can opt out whatever they want, and the less students that are in a specific program, the less money we get, and if we don't have enough money to support a small program like a service center, the few that do stay into the program aren't able to get that program because there's not enough money for us to facilitate. So it's kind of crappy. We're dealing with it. Basically, we're trying to see how our fees can get mandated. Basically, there's a difference between our institution gets to decide whether a fee can be determined as a mandatory fee that students have to pay. The ministry has kind of set out an outline for how much or what specific fees are mandatory. So our health and dental plan, our bus pass, our Walk Safe programs, those are mandated by the ministry to be mandatory. But the institution has full reign on the rest of our fees. And so we're in a consistent battle right now to make sure all of our fees can be considered mandatory. So yeah, I just wanted to give a little bit of a summary on what's happening, and if you folks want to research a little bit more about it, that'd be great. I know we're going to be involved in all the riots and but we'll get some change.
Thank you so much. That was great. And now I have Brian Hogan, who's at the very back, President of Windsor District Labour Council. For people at the back, please feel free to come and take the chairs at the front because, you know, we want you to be comfortable. So,
thank you very much. My name is Brian Hogan. I'm the president of Windsor District Labour Council. We've got about 20 affiliates and I think around 25,000 members. Paul's part of our executive, so is Ken and probably a couple others around the room. Totally agree. First of all, thank you, Law. You're the perfect group to bring us all together on behalf of Labour Council and our affiliates. Thanks for doing this. Thanks to the attendees, and thanks to Brian Brown's there on our executive. Thanks to the media. You're our voice. You know, no matter how many people are here, if the media comes out and does their job, we appreciate it, and then hundreds of thousands of people hear our message. Our job as a union by law is to take care of our members. But you probably know the labor movement for decades in this country, especially in this region. The raison d'etre is to look out for everybody, a better society, a civil society, and certainly this kind of event, we had to be here, and we're really glad to collaborate with everyone. A front to one, as you know, is a front to all. We just touch on a few cuts. Stripping of Bill 148. Bill 148, the first time in decades where there was labor law changes, improvements. And as you probably know, you know, when you're in the workplace, union, there's a collective agreement that helps, right? When you're not in a workplace, you need the Bill 148s of the world. And certainly our most vulnerable citizens in this area and across the province were taken care of by Bill 148. It wasn't perfect, but certainly they listened to people like us, and it certainly helped out. You may also know, and this is true also in BC, when the minimum wage increased, it actually helped the economy. Let me see. Let me just touch on a couple other cuts. Partial pharmacare for people people under 25 years old, and families that don't have lots of funds, was cut the day after swearing in occurred. A key issue for Labour and other progressives, and It's certainly something we're gonna push again and continue to push, certainly up, at the provincial level, but at this upcoming federal election. Health and safety cuts you just heard about a week ago will cause people to die. There will be people dying because of those cuts. And those cuts, by the way, do not help the budget. Those cuts actually were funded, the funds were coming from employees through WSFE. So the government's friends on Bay Street and big corporations are happy about that. A few more points. We're trying our best through our affiliates. We want this to grow. We want our workers to continue to connect more with citizens they work with. Education workers with parents and students, healthcare workers with patients, to help educate and of course to mobilize. A couple other things that you probably already know. Ford clearly is the face of the government. I think we can get some cracks through the other MPPs. In particular, I think the ministers. The ministers are, I remember reading an article when they first got elected, are not, a number of them are not seen as far right-wing ideologues, and they're really letting us down. For example, Carolyn Mulrooney is quoted as saying, when there was cuts to legal aid, citizens will get the same service at legal aid. That is absolutely impossible. And for that person with that pedigree to say that, I mean, those are the kind of things, sometimes I think in some ways Ford is Trumpian. And so some of the base will not listen to us if we're saying that. So I think we can get some cracks in looking at the integrity of these other people. As we say in the Labor Council and also CLC and OFL, there's a money in problem, not a spending problem. Tax breaks to the rich, tens of billions of dollars out of the green contracts that were torn up. Hundreds of contracts were torn up. $1 billion, minimum $1 billion we lost in the beer store contract, and we'll get less money into the coffers if the LCBO loses money to the corner stores. Privatization, as you know, privatization of public services is probably the main reason they're doing all this, one of the main reasons. Because it's really simple, right? If you are in a lineup at a hospital and you're gonna scratch your head, you're there with your mom, you're gonna scratch your head and say, when you're hearing about all this privatization might be good. Sooner or later, as you starve the system, it's going to seem, you know what, maybe privatization is a good idea. It's not the good idea, but the starving is the strategy. And lastly, we've got to keep an eye on municipal politicians all across the province. We're not going to be able to say, oh, that used to be paid by that level of government. Those are your citizens. You name the council, City of Windsor, out in the county, those are your citizens. If there's some starving taking place, don't let it happen. Thank you very much for your time.
So Mike Longmore, who's in this corner here, is speaking on behalf of the Unifor retirees. Welcome, Mike.
Mike Longmore, I'm a retiree from 444 and an active in the labor movement. What I'm seeing is that there's going to be a division within society. I have a insurance. I have a very better idea for me than if I didn't have any coverage. For instance, to go through colostomy, yes. Colonoscopy. I can just dream my way through it. But if you're a poor person, it's going to be hell and painful. We should not subject people to this kind of painful, and I'm sure my union brothers and sisters here will try our very best to make sure this never happens.
Thanks, Mike. Now I have John Elliott.
Oh, there he is.
My name is John. This is Robert Elliott. I am speaking on behalf of someone suffering with a disability on CPP and ODSP. I have been suicidal for more than 25 years of my life. And if it wasn't for organizations like Mental Health Connections, law, City of Windsor, I would be homeless and probably dead. It is a struggle to every day have a thought of suicide. It's continuous, and it's reasons like this that cause that. I have Asperger's syndrome, high functioning autism, and there is no assistance for an adult with autism. Everywhere I've turned, I've been turned down for assistance. I follow a practice of botany for my source of medicine. Now, because of that, I am turned down if I try to admit myself to the psych ward for suicidal ideations. I'm aware of the fact that when my ideas or plans become too grand or severe that I need a space to protect myself from acting. And it is a shame that I'm turned down simply because I practice botany. I refuse depression medications because diet can alleviate. My cousin wrote a paper at the University of Windsor specifically on autism, and that diet can alleviate 80 to 90% of the autistic symptoms affecting autistics with simple diet, a proper meal plan system. And it's a struggle every day to even find a meal, let alone have a meal. I have had a few people mention that there are moments where I will lose weight because I lose track of time. I hyper-focus on one thing and I completely lose track of time. A perfect example was there's a video game I got into a little while ago, and I fixated on it for 6 months, not even realizing 6 months had gone by. That's a lot of time to put into a single game. And when I realized that it was 6 months, I gave the game up. I said, hey, I can do better things with my time. But it was because of my state of depression that I resorted to it. I even, to an extent, consider myself a John Doe because of the fact that I know I'm not an active member of the community or contribute to society because of my limitations of access to things. There are a lot of things that my mind could be utilized for. I know for a fact that I have a profound understanding of gravity and could describe it. But without people to assist me in doing that properly and going about that, I can't. I also have a passion for computers and structural engineering. I also know that I could design structural supercomputers, which we are within rights capable of designing and building those types of structures, which could last a whole lot longer than our current structures that we are dealing with now. And it would probably even eliminate that flooding issue. But I can't do so without people.
Right.
So it is hard for me to resort to a system where I'm asking for help and looking to find resources and help and being turned down everywhere. And that only amplifies the depression. And it makes it harder. It's always been my belief that, and I know I'm not the first person to have said this, I forget who it was that stated this, but your people make the country. You empower your people, you empower your country. By making restrictions to education, mainly education, and that restricts people with finding jobs. And that discourages them from finding jobs too, because the job you do best is the job you enjoy. If you don't enjoy it, you're not going to care about doing it. And it's creating jobs is easy. We can always create jobs. It's filling those positions that's a little bit more tricky. But there's also a source of creating jobs for that as well. And restricting organizations like Legal Aid of Windsor, Mental Health Connections, and so many other services that help guide people in those directions, it's just suppressing the people further and in my opinion, going to just create a recession, opposed to a change in the economy. And like the restrictions with education, you're decreasing jobs and entrepreneurs. The more entrepreneurs that come out and create businesses, the more revenue there is for the country that people are paying taxes on, that's generating more benefits for the country. It's just, to me, absurd and outrageous. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much.
My name is Robert Elliott, and I basically want to talk on behalf of everybody who's suffering and for this situation. And what really bothered me the most is not my situation, is basically the situation with the teachers, because I believe we all want the world to get better, and the best way for the world to get better is for each one to teach one. And none of us would have made it in our life without a teacher. And but I just want to say I'm glad to have this opportunity to be a part of this group. And this is a small group. I was kind of disappointed when I came in here because I thought more people would be in here. And actually I was kind of hesitated to sign up and talk because I thought there'd be so many people ready to talk that I wouldn't have the time. But basically, this is a small start, but it is a start. And I'm just glad to have this opportunity, and us, we just got to keep the fight, and we just got to, it's all about unity. And unity is a hard thing to get one day, but it's the easiest thing to get. We all have to, it all takes a bunch of people with the same common problem. We all have the same common problem to come up with solutions to this problem. And I just hope we continue on doing this. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Robert. Next speaker is Angela Hu, and she's a Windsor Law student.
Hi everybody, my name is Angela Zhu. I just finished my 3-year degree at the University of Windsor as a law student, but I wanted to tell you guys about some of the harms as an immigrant to the cuts to immigration services and refugee services. So I came here with my family in 1997, my parents and myself, and you know, when we were first here, I hardly spoke a word of English, same with my parents. And if we didn't have supports from the communities, I don't know how my parents would have found jobs. I don't know how I would have made it through school. I don't know how I would have made it through the life that I've now led, leading me to now finish law school, which I think is a bit of an accomplishment.
Woohoo!
I must say, I'd like to think that I have done some good being a citizen, and I think that my parents have as well. My father works in the tech sector, my mother works at a bank, we pay taxes, we contribute, and we do that because we're proud Canadians. I love this country, and I wanted to be a citizen. Now, by cutting all of the funding to immigration services through Legal Aid Ontario, it means that not a single new immigrant will be able to get help the way that we did. So how many people like me are we shutting out from the system? How many people like my father and my mother are we shutting out from the system who, like, slight brag, my father designed this new software that makes database management so much better and so much more efficient, which has helped education systems and health systems and so many other things. He would not have been able to do that if we were not able to come live and work in Canada. So if we are shutting those people out of our system, if we are not letting them have a path to citizenship, we're not going to be able to see the kinds of successes in our country that I hope we all want, right? If we want Ontario to be open for business, let's invite those skilled workers who want to come and live and work here and start a family and contribute to the society. All the people who want to be Canadians, let's make that possible. I would not be able to speak English like this if not for the system. I wouldn't be able to speak with you like this if not for the supports we got. I also want to talk about the refugees briefly, though. I myself was not one, but I have friends who would have sought refugee claim, who would have claimed refugee status, or who were in the process of it. And some of them were lucky; they got their applications in time, so they're grandparented in. Some of them are new, and they are not in the system yet. Or I know of people who were sponsoring refugees who were going to come and become part of that system. None of them are going to be able to get the help that they need. And for some of them, that means they might spend another 10, 15 years without citizenship, without access to healthcare, without access to good schools for their children. That's more people that we're shutting out of the system, more people that we're preventing from entering the various sectors where they might be able to really contribute to this country like they want to. So that's how the cuts to immigration services will hurt us all. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I think we had a couple of our social work students, Cooper and Ra, are going to read some of the client stories that we were able to collect with Hugo's help. So, okay.
So my name's Cooper. I'm going to read a success story on behalf of Legal Assistance of Windsor. And in this story specifically, the letter H is being used in replacement of the name. Alrighty. H is a single mother of 5 children, 1 child born outside of Canada and others born within Canada. She arrived in Canada in 2005. A turning point in her journey was the suicide of her husband due to mental illness. Her life story / journey was reviewed at the Legal Assistance of Windsor and was further referred to medical and psychiatry exams. She has experienced pre- and post-arrival abuse and has been diagnosed with PTSD. Legal Assistance of Windsor has helped her with her ODSP and Canadian citizenship applications. After 11 years of living in Canada, she obtained her citizenship in 2017. Legal services played a vital role in the successful survival of H and her children. H is now able to take care of her family's responsibilities in a healthy manner. Her eldest child is now a university student, and all of her other children are enrolled and attend school. They have completely managed to turn their lives around and create a positive future for themselves due to the legal service they were able to count in a very timely manner. So this is one success story that Legal Assistance of Windsor was able to produce.
Hello, my name is Rua. I'm going to do the same thing. So the client that I'm representing is FH. FH is a single mother of 8 children. All her children were under 18 years old when they first arrived in Canada in 2006. She has experienced pre-arrival abuse and has been diagnosed with PTSD. Legal Assistance of Windsor has helped her with ODSP and Canadian citizenship applications. She received her Canadian citizenship in 2017. The legal support and advocacy that she received has helped her significantly with her survival, coping, and creating a new future for herself and her children. 4 of her children are now employed following their graduations with bachelor degrees from various universities. The remaining 3 children are attending university or college and are completing their studies. These are the extreme positive results trickled down by getting the legal services they were able to obtain for themselves. Thank you.
We're going to do one more each. Okay, so the letter is Y, just so everybody is aware. Y was sponsored by her husband and came to Canada in November of 2016. She had been living in an abusive relationship since then. She was emotionally and financially abused by her husband. In September of 2018, she ran away from her husband and looked for help. She was referred to Legal Assistance of Windsor for legal advice. With legal aid support, she was able to make her decision. LEW also helped her with OW, housing applications, and a St. Clair College bursary application. Currently, she is studying at St. Clair College. She's very grateful to all the help she received, so she can now start her new life.
I came to Canada in 2017 using Single Journey document with my 2-year-old daughter. A few months later, I decided to travel outside of Canada and applied for a Canadian travel document but my application was returned. The reason of the refusal was the missing signature form, my child's father, which I could not provide at that time. I was referred to Legal Assistance of Windsor for the statutory declaration that was prepared to support my application. So I went to legal aid with an interpreter to notarize my document. They carefully reviewed the statutory declaration in another reference letter, and they notarized it for me. As a result, my application was accepted, and I was able to travel with my daughter.
Okay, so that's the end of my official speakers list. Are there other people who want to say something? Yes. Yep. Laura's coming.
Hi there, my name is Linda Coltman. I'm here of personal experience as well. I also sit on one of the Legal Aid Ontario specialty clinic boards, that of Advocacy Centre for Tenants Ontario. We provide funding through ACTO for the Tenant Duty Council program throughout Ontario. And those are the lawyers that go in and help tenants in low and moderate incomes actually go before tribunals and that to keep a home and help them do paperwork for evictions. Because we only have 5 minutes, I think one of the things I'd like to do, I also do case law and different things for such things like rent control and making standard form leases and different things. But given the lack of time, I'd like to use my personal experience kind of tie it into a story of how I got involved with this. I'm someone with experience with homelessness and disability. I started in advocacy about 25 years ago because the person I went into organ failure as a teenager. Through that organ failure, because my parents couldn't afford the rent and they couldn't afford to pay for my medical expenses for drugs at the time, I ended up homeless, living in the shelter system in Toronto for 6 months before I get access to a renter to income, home and subsidized housing to enable me to go through dialysis and go through a transplant and survive. I also ended up at the time on ODSP because I needed actually income and drug benefits to keep me alive. Since that time, I managed to get out of renter to income housing into the private sector. I've managed to, over the past 25 odd years, be on and off ODSP and be on and off the system for trillium drug benefits. I've also in that time been an advocate for housing and homelessness issues, serving on multiple local boards. I moved to Windsor from Toronto in 2012. Poverty reduction and an advocate for people with disabilities, like myself and others who have chronic episodic disabilities and just in general tend to be on either the OW or the ODSP spectrum. Aside from my housing experience with the ACTO and the legal aid cuts and what worries me about what that entails, what's worrying me now is I ended up in this situation with the past Conservative government, essentially, and the fact that these cuts are systemic. For instance, we cut legal aid, we cut the ability to fight for people in low and moderate incomes in ways, like I myself, we see more people ending up homeless because they can't fight evictions, they can't keep a home over the head. We cut ODSP, we cut OW, again, they can't afford to pay the rent, they can't afford to eat healthy diets to keep healthy and stay stable longer. And in my case, for instance, my health, like I said, is episodic. This past year alone, I've had 3 surgeries and multiple hospitalizations. I'm in a bad period at the time with organ failure. I'll probably end up on dialysis again soon and having another transplant. We don't have a workforce, despite all of these changes that are coming down for definitions and that currently accommodates people with episodic disabilities or any disability getting in and out of the workforce to be able to sustain employment, to sustain housing, to sustain different things. And as we know, when you have episodic, as John so lovely said, he's very eloquent, I love what he was talking about when he was talking, to sustain the ability to keep our health. I consider housing to be the cornerstone of all things to actually be able to get your health, what allowed me to survive. And the same with a healthy diet. You need to have a level of stability with income and housing to be able to get the health stability, to be able to be productive. In my case, because I've been in bad health spurt, going into organ failure down with my transplant the past couple of years, I went back to university. Under the first government, I was unable to complete a degree because the rule back then was you were either fully disabled or you were not, and you couldn't be on OSAP if you were on ODSP. You had to go off and take grants. And the problem with that for me was my medication costs were above what the university drug plans would cover, so I had to give up on school. And the only solution to that back then was, I was told by management at the time, go out and get pregnant, change my definition, become a single mother instead of a person with disabilities. I didn't do that, so I never finished my degree the first time. I finished my degree, and I just actually finished with high enough marks that I got a full Canadian scholarship to do my master's degree now. But again, if we're going into the cycle again, and the systemic nature of it, I'm worried about the generation now, 20 years later, of all the people who have health issues now, and all the people coming up in the system that are teenagers with disabilities, and all the people with the episodic definitions of disabilities, and as we change these things, what's going to happen to all the people that end up in the same situation as I was when the cut legal aid force? Back then when my carers talked about it, they never made the cuts. In fact, they strengthened legal aid. The board that I sit on now at the Center for Tenants Ontario was one of the boards created because they recognized they needed to be able to actually fight landlord-tenant issues under a changing system. So was ISAC, Income Security Advisory Center, that's the handout to people who wrote the disability definition, that started fighting some of these legislative changes. Now we're talking about cutting all of those things as well as making these other cuts, placing more people in jeopardy, and theoretically placing more people in homeless situations and dire situations in other ways. And last but not least, as the lady had mentioned, for years I've served on public health boards and on hospital boards. And I'm very worried about Windsor-Essex with the public health boards, because what I understand is the amalgamation, we're going to end up in a public health sector now that covers Windsor starting in London. I mean, at the end of that, again, public health is a big support, especially for people with low and moderate incomes. So with the whole systematic, I really think, like in general, we have to band together collectively rather than just fight for a housing sector or a disability sector or whatever. We need to collectively band together and fight for the systemic nature of these to keep our Ontario where we want to see it. So thank you very much.
Okay, any other comments people want to make? Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead, Donna.
My name is Donna Labonte Satars. I started off as an advocate back in 2009. I helped work with Pathway to Potential, put food in the budget, and different organizations. I was at the end of my time working with Pathway to Potential. I had encouragement from Marion. I've had encouragement from Adam Vasey and that to go back to school. I went back to school. I did start at the business administration, but I ended up going back to it after trying to do networking. And I found out that a lot of the information that I held in my head is what the teachers were looking for students. And I'm saying that if they make cuts on education right now, you're cutting off a student's chance to shine. I think that these cuts are ridiculous for what he's doing, and we should be able to get together and tell them that. Also, on the other end of the spectrum, I'm also a person with a prolonged disability. St. Clair College helped me apply for financial aid backing for that and everything else while I'm going to school. If it wasn't for them, and if it wasn't for my instructors and the other people who helped me along the way, I wouldn't be where I am today. Hopefully within a year and a half, I will be able to graduate, provided that there are no further cuts to education than what they've made so far. And hopefully they can repeal what they've made so far eventually. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. At the back. Yeah, Musa, Ken? Yeah.
Hello everyone, my name is Musa Hamadani. I'm currently a law student at Legal Assistance in Windsor, and I wasn't, as you can see, I didn't sign up to speak, but I got encouraged and inspired to speak towards the end. I mean, a community organizer early on when I was doing a lot of political work and community organizing here in Windsor, Essex, had once told me, don't necessarily look at who's in the room, look at who's not in the room. And I think that sort of drove me to think about the refugees, the immigrants, the racialized and indigenous folks that are not present here today. And I felt of some sort of moral obligation. I'm not a spokesperson on every person of color's behalf or racialized person or indigenous person, and I don't claim to be that. However, I felt some sort of moral obligation to bring that voice forward and act as some sort of voice for the people that are not here. And I think with that being said, one of the handouts that we got today is titled "Stop the Cuts, Access to Justice for All." And as some of us at Windsor Law especially know that access to justice has an intersectional impact on different people. access to justice. The financial element is one aspect of it, but there's also different hurdles that are set in front of different people in Canada and in Ontario especially. So I think with talking about legal aid cuts, it leaves me wonder what kind of Ontario and what kind of province we're fostering, one that leaves the vulnerable more vulnerable, and just keeps me wondering whether it serves the purpose, what it's set out to serve, and that's to alleviate and ameliorate the position of disadvantage and the conditions of disadvantaged people and folks in Ontario and in Canada. On one hand, we have, we're very welcoming, open arm policy, so on and so forth. And on the other side, we're shutting doors in front of people that need it the most. So I just wanted to put that out there, just my 2 cents, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
Where's my water? Hi, I'm Melody Cook, and I am the operations director of Community in Windsor. And because I haven't heard anything around the voice of people who have an intellectual disability, I do want to represent that a little bit tonight. We've had the pleasure actually of being involved with the iDecide program, so I was glad to hear Tanner talk about that, because that program has filled a huge void that we've seen for years, where people we support don't understand their rights. It's very difficult cognitively for most of us to navigate a legal system. It's more difficult for people who have an intellectual disability, for sure. So they've been involved in not only teaching people their rights, but getting involved in situations where people end up having a capacity assessment that they don't understand why they're having it, and then their decision-making rights are entirely taken away. And so it's been very effective in terms of that involvement. But my other concerns as I sit here tonight are also things like ODSP, and how somebody, when they're changing a definition, someone with an intellectual disability who may be under a new definition doesn't fall under ODSP, how does one navigate an appeal process through that? And I've seen what that process looks like. I find it hard to understand. I can't imagine if you're struggling cognitively how you're ever going to understand it, because it's like an entirely new language. I was also interested in the conversation around where employment services is going. The gentleman talked about Ontario Works. We're not sure where it's going for people who have an intellectual disability, but if it is going to private for-profit providers, the people we support who've gotten jobs, their employers will tell you they are phenomenal employees. They're loyal employers and they're great employees. They require a little more support up front. When you go to a private for-profit provider, it takes a little bit more cost up front. And my fear is that in going that direction, A, the expertise won't be there to properly support them, but B, they'll be cut off because they won't see the same profit. So those are some of my concerns in terms of people with intellectual disability. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Ellen. So, Ken?
Thanks, Marion. I just want to echo some of Paul Chislet's comments that he mentioned to start off, because I think it's worth mentioning that when Rob Ford got elected, he got Doug Ford. He got elected with absolutely no platform at all, and that people are angry, they're frustrated. You see that in terms of what's happening in the United States, as Paul mentioned. The trends in politics, where people are distrustful of government. We see our democracy is collapsing, not just here in Windsor, Essex, in Ontario, in Canada, throughout North America, throughout the world. We're seeing a climate crisis, obviously throughout the world, growing inequality, poverty. The reality is those are trends. And I just want to speak to the panel for just a second, that as we're kind of preparing our thoughts in terms of how do we respond, it's worth mentioning that we're not always starting from scratch, because some communities are actually starting to think about how we can build at a grassroots level and rebuild community. And some of the things that I've seen, for example, are some communities are moving away from this thing about NDP or conservative, right-wing or left-wing, and actually starting to think about how do we organize around values. Because when we start having conversations with people in the community about values, people have good values. The question is how is there going to be an opportunity for them to express that? And how is there going to be an opportunity to plug in? And I really appreciate the brother's comments when he said, who's not in the room? We really have to ask ourselves as we start thinking about hopefully building a coalition. what type of culture do we want to build that other people that aren't in the room with us today says, I want to be part of that group? How is it that we're going to put things forward in our community that just don't say what it is that we're against, but what it is that we're for, and how we can create groups together, even if it's small victories, just to show that when people come together, we can have small victories and that people can make a difference. The next part is capacity building. Somehow within our organizations, institutions, throughout Windsor, Essex, and everywhere, we've kind of moved away from capacity building. And to Dave, I just want to give a quick example. If you think about our educational programs, they weren't just educational programs. They were opportunities for people to build camaraderie and friendships, learn, debate, discuss, and to start to think about how to strategize and really build those friendships that makes being part of civic engagement not feel like a chore, but actually feel like something that we enjoy doing, because people don't always want to go to funerals. And then my last comment that I really want people to think about is, how is it that we could really start having some fun doing this? Because there is a lot of stress. There is a lot of mental health challenges. There is a lot of despair in our community. And the reality is that sometimes, and I think we're missing the connection, that we can't keep having all these cuts and these pressures and these stresses put on people's lives and not make the connection that's why we're experiencing so much mental health challenges in our community, and start making those connections. And then again, how is it that we can just find ways to start loving each other, caring for each other, and again, building capacity. And one quick comment, and I just want to give you an example of being part of the Healthcare Coalition. One thing I absolutely know that we can do is we need to start thinking about how do we put some educational modules together to start thinking about people that are most affected by whatever their circumstance is, so they can learn to better advocate for themselves. And the reality is, I got actually, I'll blame myself, but we weren't building capacity at our health coalition. So at a time when our public health services are under attack now more than ever, we're not building the capacity. And the question is, why is that? Another quick comment on that is, I think of some of our institutions, democratic institutions in our community that are supposed to be about justice, don't want us to actually engage with their members. Don't want us to have them actually participate and enhance their skills because of turf. So one thing nice that I think we need to start thinking about is, if we can build a group, how is it that we can build a group that's really inclusive, that invites everyone, that thinks about, again, how we can start making a difference in even small ways to show people that democracy does matter. Right. Working together matters. Thanks.
Great. Any other hands? Anybody else want to say something? Okay, last call for comments. Okay, so what we're going to do, it's just 7:30, so we're going to give our panelists 15 minutes, and you can talk to each other and come back with your astounding recommendations, which we can talk about. You guys are 3 minutes ahead of schedule, pretty awesome. I don't know how to pick your panel. Okay, so I'm just going to turn it over to our panelists to give us some recommendations, share their thoughts about what they heard tonight, and how we could respond to the concerns that were raised. So,
yay. I'm just going to start off, first of all, by saying thank you to everyone so much. This is an incredible evening, and for me, it just, I've just been retired 1 year, but so this brings me back to a lot of hard work way back, 38 years on Drouillard Road, and so I understand all of what we're now going to go through. But thank you so much for your presentations, for your presence, and for caring about our community. You realize we didn't have a lot of time to chit-chat over there, so, and the one thing that stuck out, I think, for the three of us was, I forget who said it, but who's not in the room? And when you're sitting up here, it was really clear to me in looking at who is here and very clear who's not here. So that was one of the things we really discussed a little bit. So I'm going to turn it over to Hugo, who's going to give a few other remarks.
Great, thank you so much. And as far as the distinguished part, this is my privilege to be here with my counterparts. So thank you for everything you've done in the community over the years. I wanted to kind of just give an overview. I know we're going to get to some more formal stuff, and Dave will take over on that. But I can't help but be eager to share some of my reflections, some of our reflections on this evening. And I want to start with carrying forward the thank yous. And I want to thank everyone that is actively participating in their community, well beyond the roles that you play in the community in your work. You are committed. You are here on an evening when you have families and you have other things you could be doing. The weather finally turned around and we could all be outside enjoying, but you're showing your compassion and your care for this community and for what is at stake here. I specifically also want to thank everyone that is involved formally with Legal Assistance of Windsor. And if you feel comfortable, I'd like actually for you to stand up because one of the things, so if anyone's involved as a student or staff, one of the things that has been very clear as far as the messaging within the legal, the community legal clinic movement on this is that we want to make this about what it's meant to be, and that's the people that they're serving, that you are serving. But I can say this because I'm not part of that. My job is sort of not on the line, and we shouldn't make it about that. But there's also this interesting contradiction that the people that have committed their careers, their passion, their education, their whole lives to help people now have to defend their place in the society. So over things that are, I believe, less important than committing your life to helping others, to building a community, to building health and the things that matter in life, you've committed that. And Tanner touched on that, talking about how this impacts education, and the education of the future lawyers that are going to work for legal issues for those that can't have access, and that's incredibly important. One of the things that I've heard over the years is, when harm is caused, it's like a rock being dropped in water, and you see the ripple effects. Well, what happens when there are rocks after rocks after rocks being thrown at the same time? The ripple effects, we don't actually understand fully how that impacts everybody. And this room is full of people that are not represented. So, yes, there was a comment. This room, there's not thousands of people, but I believe it does represent thousands of people. Each one of you that spoke are speaking not just for yourselves. It's not just one voice. There are full communities behind you, full families behind you. And we're talking about legal issues here as far as the cuts there. But then education and autism services and social services. There's so much happening in this community. Legal clinics alone, there's 72 in Ontario, and they served 240,000 people last year. That's just one area impacted from these cuts. What about when you add up all the people that are impacted by all the other cuts? So yes, not everyone is in this room, but we're really talking about a huge majority of this province. And when government is meant to represent and speak for us, we are the majority. This room is representative of the majority. You've spoken for refugees. You've spoken for those that have disabilities, those that don't have access to justice. I think I was worried coming in here to leave very discouraged, and it's been completely the opposite. I feel so energized that there's so much passion in this room and so much representation that we can make a difference in. And our community has shown that already, as far as the way that government is backing down on some of the changes and reinvesting and realizing that this just can't go on exponentially without any response. So I really wanted to thank you all for your voices and the voices that you've represented here tonight. I think that's important. Just a couple other comments if I can make them. Oh, this is not working. Okay. So maybe I'll leave it there actually, but I think it's really important for us to just be reminded of that this is something that can change and nothing is set in stone. And I think this is part of the conversation, and I'm actually excited that this movement can take a lot of strength moving forward. So I'll throw it over to Dave, who I think has some.
Thanks, Hugo. We had 3 recommendations, but listening to the speakers was phenomenal. and the courage for people to stand up and tell their story was phenomenal. But when we listen, when you talk about legal assistance of Windsor, the cuts, what are you really talking about? You're talking about keeping people silent. You're talking about exploiting people. You're talking about pushing people aside. Healthcare, the cuts to healthcare that was raised. What are you talking about? You're talking people that are rich are going to be fine. But what about the rest of us? It's just that small group taking care of themselves. Education, the same thing. If you got money, you're okay. If you don't, you're not. And this is from the people, violence against women, the environment. I mean, all these things that have been talked about, but what we didn't talk about, and I don't want to overly emphasize it, but look at Ford in the provincial government as far as some of his appointments. You know, he's got friends, his former tour director making $350,000 a year. There's another one, head of the PC party, and I know, you know, Marion, in what you're doing, you don't want to get in a hole, but it's a reality. There's take care of the few at the expense of everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the first recommendation. Actually, it's more of a question. We've got some work to do to put some wheels on this thing if we're really going to challenge what's happening. I think we're all pretty much on the same page. So the first question / recommendation is, are we committed to do something together?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that, how about some hands?
Yeah.
All right, good, good.
So I think that accomplishes that recommendation. The second one is we need to create a small group. And with this, we talk more about this small group than we did anything else because we get it. But it's not going to, we don't think it should be a steering committee because then it's dictatorial. So here's the real question. If you want to participate in moving this thing and actually putting a little extra effort in, we need to get your contact information. That is simple as that. So, and I'll leave that. Did you want to touch any more on that, Marina?
No, I think that's one of the most important pieces. We don't want to have a committee, or we don't want to have, I don't like that top-heavy kind of piece. I think it's all about empowerment and in listening to one another, no matter where and what. And we don't want it to be like your issue is more important than somebody else's issue. So we want to be able to leave that all at the door and be able to come in and talk about all those issues, but they only come around to 3 or 4 things. So we want to try and make it as easy as possible for people to participate and to listen to one another. I think there's one thing though that we did say that we need immediately to be able to send either letters or petitions, and maybe Marion can explain that a little bit more, to the present government about the whole legal aid situation. I mean, I think that's already been a cut, and I think that's so important that and I think you've got stuff back there. So
Yeah, so at the table as you came in, you were signing a petition opposing the legal aid cuts, and there's an action sheet about calling the Premier, calling the Attorney General, reaching out to your MPP, who are here, if you're living in the city of Windsor. And so, you know, to follow the actions on there, there's telephone numbers that you can call, emails that you can send. So you've got it in your hot little hands right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And thank you, Percy, and Lisa Gretzky, too, for what you do in the community. And the final recommendation, and Marina touched on it, we've kind of done similar things over a lot of years, and sometimes it becomes a challenge where your issue is the only issue. And somehow we've got we've got so much in common. We truly do. So there's an opportunity, there's a void.
Yeah.
And we need to do something about that.
Yeah.
And the final recommendation is, more than once we said about the people that aren't in the room. So for all of us that said that, including me, next time let's bring them in the room. Let's invite them, let's get them out with us.
Right.
So there's our 3
Excellent.
recommendations.
Excellent. Thank you so much. What a good job, Dan. So just so you know, so if you have signed in, then we have your contact information. And so Laura Pratt is going to take control of that because it got a bit gay to me. I'd be filing it somewhere. and never to be able to find it again. So Laura Proud is going to take charge of that, and then we will reach out to people and ask you if you want to come together and do some more planning so that we can stay on top of these issues and connect with other communities in the province, right? Because these kind of meetings are going on all over Ontario, right? And so it's important for the government to understand that in every sector of Ontario, citizens are coming together, residents are coming together saying we're concerned about your potential cuts to our livelihood, our well-being, the well-being of our community, and we want to have a dialogue about that, and we want to talk to you so that you can understand what our concerns are, because that's what we expect of good government. And so we have your contact information, and we'll be following up with you to let you know what our next actions are going to be and how to go forward. Because the last thing we want to do is think, okay, I came out, nothing happened. So no, this is the beginning of this coalition building, right, in this community, so that we can be responsive. And I think it's we're hoping that there will be representatives of the municipal government here, because the municipalities it's another whole sector where they are going to be affected in so many different ways. And we know that the trick with municipalities is they can't run a deficit, so that means they increase taxes or cut services, right? And so when we're facing cuts on the provincial level, the last thing we can do is, handle more cuts on the municipal level, right? So we are very much committed. I mean, part of what we are required to do under the Legal Aid Services Act is community development. So as long as that act is as it is, we will be putting a lot of energy into that, right? Because it's so important. Yeah, Mike.
There will be costs. Should we set up some kind of a bank account that we're
Okay. Yeah. So Mike's ever so practical, thinking of as we go forward, how will we address the costs for our organization, and we are absolutely going to look into that, because there are agencies who can give us financial support. Like, everybody has something. You guys came tonight and you told us your stories, you told us your worries, you told us what you were concerned about, how these cuts are going to impact you, how you've overcome cuts that were made earlier and how that really slowed down your progress and what you were able to accomplish. But in spite of those cuts, you still came out and you still have moved forward. So it's our intention, this community, we are moving forward, and we are moving forward together, right? And so we will be, putting together a contact list and bringing people back out and looking at what strategies we can do, because the things that we're talking about are just, as Paul said, they're not unreasonable things. Affordable housing, decent income, appropriate and fair working conditions, right? Compensation for people who get injured on work, health unit that is active in our community and responsive to our community, allowing our children to go to further education without coming out with tons of debt, allowing people to be retrained in ways that are going to lead to livable wages and not just put through a system and feeling defeated afterwards. So there are so many things that we heard about, and when we look at the history of Windsor and the diversity of culture and experience we have, those cuts that they have made to the support of refugee services is just not acceptable, and so the government needs to understand that. So all these issues are just hitting people on very basic needs and affecting our quality of life. And so I'm so grateful to all of you. You have no idea how happy I am that you all came out tonight. And so I'm going to be so obnoxious with the rest of my 72 community legal clinics and say we had a full house in Windsor.
Inclusivity has to be a really big part of this group, and I think it was spoken also was mentioned. I like that the comment that was made earlier as far as how do we focus on the values of what we all believe, regardless of what party or where you work or what issue you're championing. And I think that has to be a fundamental shift that some of us need to make. I'm a big champion of that. I think that's incredibly important and powerful. It's incredibly hard and frustrating to actually make happen, though. The real work happens in the longevity of having to give and take, and being able to say I'm willing to give up something for somebody else. And that's, I think, is something that needs to change. And I think when we talk about Canadian identity, this is a part of what I think we're known for around the world, and it actually ties into our Indigenous history. Indigenous communities sat in a circle, and despite the ugly, horrible history that followed, one of the things I think we've maintained is this idea that was just spoken about, that we sit in a circle, we are all equal, we all contribute, we're all valuable, and as people join, that circle widens and widens and widens, and the wisdom and the sense of community grows with it, that everybody is equal. I think we need to get back to those sort of roots and values and learn alongside our Indigenous communities that have a lot to teach us about how to get back to that, because that's what they taught us, and that's what we almost try to destroy and kill in the process. But that could also, I think, save us moving forward. And so I think that's really an important point to make as far as how do we move forward. It's not easy. It's going to be incredibly hard, but I think that's the work that we really need to get to.
I think we're up for it. So I'm just going to, I'm looking at the clock, and I really want to honor people's time because it's just 8:03. So I'm going to say thank you all so much for coming out tonight. I so appreciate your support, and I know you believe in this community, and we are very committed to righting the wrongs and making things right. On the way out, if you see any food out there, grab it, take it. The last thing we want to do is haul it back to our office, so please take as much as you want. And